Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kevin Askew, Director of Sales at TechXtend, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar under the free webinar series, Maximizing Data Quality for Value and ROI. Today's webinar, Why Should You Use CA ERwin R8? Today's agenda will include a brief overview of TechXtend, followed by today's webinar hosted by Victor Rodriguez, Data Management and Data Warehousing Consultant here at TechXtend. We'll also have a questions and answers period and end up with a summary. A little bit about TechXtend. We have a 30-year history, formerly known as Programmer's Paradise. We were the source for developer and database tools. Today at TechXtend, we also focus on virtualization and cloud computing, storage and data management, business intelligence and information management, and mobile device management, with license management solutions and financial payment options to help you pay for it all. Our data modeling credentials include being the leading e-seller of developer and infrastructure tools. Those tools fall under our database worldview ecosystem. For CA, we are an elite partner and the #1 data modeling reseller in North America. We also have a dedicated sales and engineering team focused on database modeling and infrastructure design and training services. Under our database worldview, we provide industry-leading database tools for your end-to-end database infrastructure needs. I will now turn things over to Victor for today's webinar. Victor?
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for attending again. So I'm going to kind of give you like a little background on what the point of this webinar is. Kind of wanted to show, I know a lot of people have not yet upgraded to ERwin R8. Just kind of show some of the features I find especially useful in the context of ERwin R8 and value proposition making that upgrade. Whether you're using ERwin 7 or using 4.1.4, I know some of you may not even be using ERwin anymore, maybe not using data management tools as part of your day-to-day practices. But there's a lot of new functionality that you may find useful to you, and hopefully we get to touch on a lot of these topics today during this presentation. So the agenda for the day, we're going to kind of show you, most of this is going to be demonstration. I don't really have a lot of slides to bore you folks with today. I'm going to kind of focus on showing you the functionality in the software itself. We have some new layout options that kind of help you find, discover design within, designs that you may have inherited or you may be importing via some of the meta integration bridges that are available now in ERwin as well, which I'll show you in some detail in case you're not familiar with it. And then quick ways of building those subject areas and diagram objects based on, the discovery we do as far, in regard to these, this design structure. And then the idea of using this new tool, the bulk editor. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We'll introduce it to you if you're not. If you are familiar with it and you just primarily think of it as a reporting tool, kind of show you how you can do a lot of your day-to-day modeling behavior within this this tool as a modeling dashboard, which we like to call it. And then kind of how do we deliver that design to our end users quickly. I will briefly touch on the web portal too, which many of you may have heard about recently, and it's a new release from via ERwin where you can actually easily web publish to a searchable web-based utility that you can get out to your business users for discovery and analysis on their end. They can also generate reports from that tool as well. But we'll touch on that briefly. That's something that's an additional tool, but I'll begin by showing you some of the ability of delivering your design out to your end users. And then we'll be taking questions at the end. You feel free during the demo, if you do have questions, to put in a question there to the QA. Hopefully someone over here will bring my attention to it, and if not, I will hopefully see it pop up on my screen, and I'll take the questions as they come in. If I do happen to miss your question when you type it in there, I will be sure to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, let me get into my demonstration. So this is ERwin R8. Not much to see here. I have everything kind of minimized, and that's actually by design. ERwin R8 now allows you to basically invoke these editors as needed. This is something that's nice if you have limited desk space. You don't have to have your screens cluttered with all these different windows, especially as these new features have been added in the tool. But what I'm going to do here is try to show you a use case where I've used some of the new ERwin features to do a reverse engineer, and then to kind of do some discovery, break that design up into multiple subject areas. And then I'm going to show you a data warehousing example where this has some value as well. So first of all, I'm going to do a reverse engineer. I'm going to use a template file that I've created previously in ERwin. And what these template files allow you to do is basically have objects that you're going to use as best practices on a regular basis. Those template files can contain anything that would be in a regular ERwin file. So perhaps you're sharing tables that are being used repeatedly across multiple designs. Maybe it's modeling behavior. Maybe it's domains that you're using over and over again. Maybe it's the naming standards for your organization that you are attaching to multiple models. If you create it as a template, it becomes available for use in the future. I'm going to connect to a SQL Server environment here. I'm going to accept all the defaults here. This is familiar to anybody who's used ERwin in the past, the reverse engineer functionality, other than adding support for new features, which is a key feature of ERwin R8, by the way, is that, for example, SQL Server 2008, Teradata 13, just as two examples, DB2's latest versions as well, having not only the ability of connecting to those databases, but having full feature exploitation for those as well. So I'm going to connect to the AdventureWorks model. And the reverse engineer will complete very quickly. This is significantly faster than it was in ERwin 7. So if you are using ERwin 7 and reverse engineer takes a long time, just kind of as a pointer that the ERwin R8 actually has the ability of reverse engineering pretty quickly. So a few key features here. I'm going to zoom out slightly and just show you that I did use a template file, and I have behavior defined within that template file. So for example, my views have this particular fill color. So it's simply by looking at the blue fill color on these views, I can identify them immediately as views. My tables have this gray fill color. My foreign keys have a red italic font, and my alternate key indexes members are in this greenish font. So quickly, just by having this template attached, I'm actually able to identify, the behavior in my models. Of course, if I'm familiar with the rules I've defined myself within those themes, I have the ability of quickly understanding the design at a higher level just by accomplishing this reverse engineer. Now I'm going to zoom out here and show you some of what's happened here in the R8 tool. When we zoom out, it may at first look like what we're used to seeing in ERwin, where we kind of have these tables scattered around, and we're not sure if there's, what the representation of this design is. But when we actually dig in a little deeper to some of these related areas, we start finding that, for example, this particular set of tables that are grouped together up here are all related to this employee table. And I'll zoom in on that and show you that in more detail. This is employee here. And if we zoom out, again, oops, too much zooming out. We can move over to another area in our design and find that we have another related group of objects in the table here as well. Let's take a look down here. Here's another nesting of tables here, and if we kind of look here, this is product. So these are all product-related tables and views. So at first, kind of looking like the same kind of scattered design we're used to seeing in ERwin, we do see the relationship lines are much cleaner, which is something that I really like. But you also notice that there actually is logic in this design. So there's a lot more in this design than we initially see coming in there. But ERwin actually has multiple layout optionality here. So let me show you what the different layout tools actually allow you to do. My favorite behavior, or what I kind of have as a best practice when I initially do a reverse engineer, is to use this circular layout option. So if I click on the circular layout option, we end up seeing these different areas, these different circles within our design. Now, this particular, the representation of the model as these different circles really doesn't have much value. But what these circles represent is actually very valuable. What we'll find here, for example, here's our product table, for example, and these tables in this circle are all directly related to this product table. And if we go to another area, we'll find another grouping of objects that are related to each other. And then we see this large circle here, which has multiple different areas of interest. So what I'm going to do is show you, since we have a pretty clean representation of what's going on in this circle here, I'm going to actually highlight this circle and use yet another layout option, which is tree layout. And I'm going to redraw these relationship lines. And if I zoom in on this, we'll see a pretty nice design here related to this product table. flowing down to some of these category of products, tables, and information like that. Now that I've actually had this defined, it's already highlighted, by the way. I could actually, if I wanted to, just right-click on this and do a grouping. This basically would allow them to all be identified as related objects, and they'll actually move together on the screen. And if, at some point you come in here later on, you'll see this dashed line, but if you select anywhere, any view or any view member, or I should say any object member to this group, the entire grouping becomes highlighted. Oops. I double-clicked on that table editor. So the entire grouping becomes highlighted once you identify that. Now, another feature we can do here, I'm actually going to ungroup these. Is that now that I've actually identified some structure here with these product-related objects, I can quickly create a subject area. Oh, let me actually copy this. I'm going to create a new subject area. I'll call it like product-related, for example. And I'm actually going to paste that in here. So now I've created this different subject area with these product-related objects. So a very quick way of being able to create a subject area, and it's not just an arbitrary subject area. It's not just something that I'm picking and choosing objects from a long list of tables. It's actually letting ERwin do the discovery of those related objects, and then quickly identifying, those based on those relationships, what the relationship between those objects are, and then showing a logical design level for what is actually being represented within the design. So let's go back into the main subject area and take a look at some of these other features. So once again, we've already done these. We've seen the circular design. We have this very large circle over here. And what's interesting about the circle tool is that you can actually break circles up into subcircles. So if we actually go to this larger circle down here, I can highlight it once again. I can break it out into another circular breakout. We'll see up here we have some entities related to some sales information. I can now click on yet another circle here, break it out again. And if you wanted to actually use this and go into create a subject area from this, let me actually step backwards here and bring that circle back into context again. And I'm just doing an undo and redo, by the way, to build that. I'm going to create yet another subject area here. And we'll make this as contact related. And I would paste in this new circle into this new subject area. So once again, it's still a circular design. And there are yet other features I can have within this particular design. So let's take a look at some of the other options we have here. Now that we have this very relatively large grouping of related tables and views, I can do, for example, a hierarchical display. And if I zoom out now, I'll find, for example, that this hierarchical display actually shows my objects from the least dependent object within the list down to the most dependent object from the list. So, for example, I find the highest level is this contact, this idea of a contact, and then that propagates downwards to the employee table, for example, down to salesperson, and then we have different categories for what an employee is, and then it trickles all the way down to these views that are actually used for reporting on all these, for the employee table, views for reporting on salesperson, store demographics, etc. So we see, of course, as we would expect to see, that the least dependent objects towards the top in a hierarchical display, we're seeing the least or the most independent objects up top, most dependent objects down towards the bottom. So once again, a very quick way of actually identifying, structure within this design. And this yet another display option within the tool itself. So another really nice feature of the tool. Now, yet another feature is that within these subject areas, which we've built like the subject area here, is that we can actually have the concept of multiple diagrams. So in this one, we have this whole entire contact information, but we might want to have some granularity and look at just the tables specifically associated to the employee table, for example. Where was employee? Over here. So how would we actually, strategically do that using the features we've already shown here so far? Well, the first technique is I'm going to create a new diagram within this existing subject area. And I'm going to go to the properties for this diagram. And I can change it here. I'm going to call it like employee related, for example. And when I go to my members, I can actually specify a particular table and say, okay, well, let me look at the employee table. And then I can actually select to have use objects using this neighborhood tool to actually say, okay, I would like to see one level of ancestors. Or actually, you know what? Let's say no ancestors and 2 levels of descendants. If I add those over, you'll see that a lot of the contact information has been cut out. A lot of these, address table and a lot of the currency table, stuff that's being used, these reference tables that are being used are being cut out by using this neighborhood tool. And now I'm really kind of creating these tables and views that are really specifically associated with the employee information. So now that I've done that, I see this nice ugly stack of objects right in the middle of my screen. But I can actually, use, once again, these layout options to create some design here. So I can use a tree layout once again. I'm going to redraw my relationship lines. I'm going to zoom out. And we're going to see a nice design here. Here's my employee table up top. We have the ability of having all this information down below. So very quick way, you can imagine, I know I've had experiences where users would basically, something simple like this could take potentially a day to achieve, and it's something they would be able to achieve in minutes using the new version of ERwin. So a nice feature here. Now, like I mentioned before, we actually have the ability of defining these themes. So, I have this generic blue theme that I'm using back here, but I did have a custom theme that I've created previously. And if I apply that theme, I see, once again, I can identify where my foreign keys are, where my alternate keys are. I know that these are views because they have this different fill color, so different behavior I can identify there. So once again, a very nice feature for being able to edit the diagram using this functionality and being able to identify, most importantly, identify behavior within the diagram. I guess I didn't apply that. Let me go back and apply that theme. Close out of there. Okay, there we go. So we've applied that theme to this collection of objects. Now, another really nice feature in ERwin R8 from a point of view of presentation is being able to have the ability of displaying your additional attribute properties using this grid display feature. So for example, let's say I turn on my column properties, the domain properties, null option, the PK and AK designators, and just do that for now. If I close out of here and we look at, if I zoom in on one of these tables, you'll see that we're seeing this kind of ugly display that we saw all the way back in 4.1.4 and 8 as well, where we see these like long run-on, strings that are very hard to understand when you're, actually seeing that in this display. So a new feature in R8 is this ability of showing columns and grids, I should say attributes and columns as a grid. And this is actually a really nice feature in the tool. And if we actually step back now, we'll see that now we have these nice columns for each and every one of the actual tables that are going to be here. So it's very easy to read, very easy to print out and display to your end users, and much easier to read than you saw in the past. Now we do see that my tables are kind of cluttered here because I've added all these new properties. But once again, I'm going to use the same hierarchical display. I should say actually this is a tree display. I'm going to do a tree display, and I'm going to reset my relationship paths, and there we go. So once again, the employee table up top and the same views that we saw before. now much more, with much more information, obviously. So another key differentiator on the tool is the ability of having now some new display levels. So for example, a key display level, I should say. And what this allows us to do is immediately, ERwin is basically filtering down my the display to include only columns that are members of keys. So this is just another display level, but it's a very convenient way of getting this out. And so this is actually one of my favorite ways of kind of, for application development team or somebody like that, this oftentimes all they're concerned with is those key members, and this is actually a really, quick way of actually displaying this to those team members. Of course, we can have different diagrams that we have that display the information at different levels. But even more importantly is, let me show you some additional features you have within diagrams. For this diagram, I'm actually going to include everybody that was there in the original diagram we created. And what I'm actually going to change this to is I'm going to change this to the table display level. This includes just tables, and I'm going to do a tree layout, a hierarchical layout for this one. If we zoom out, you can see they have a very different view here of these tables. We basically are just containing just the entity names themselves. We can change this once again to just be maybe our definitions. I'm not sure if this model actually has very good definitions, but let's take a look at the comments and see what it looks like. Okay, they do have comments. That's good. So now a very different look and feel to these particular objects. But something that's new in R8 that wasn't supported in previous versions was that we can actually have different levels of display optionality depending on your actual object. So you can have multiple display levels within, not only within a diagram, which was something that ERwin never actually supported previously. You can actually have, for example, you probably saw in ERwin 7 a big limitation was that if I changed the fill color for this contact table, it would have that same fill color across my entire diagram. Now, of course, the contact table can have a completely different look and feel depending on what diagram I'm in. But even within the context of a single diagram, I can actually have different behavior defined here. So for example, maybe this employee table up top is going to be going to have a level of display of just the definition. And then maybe my views are going to be collapsed as well. Maybe, let me see, do they have comments? They do. Okay, so I can actually have my views broken out to include just their comments. So I actually have the column information for my views. And then maybe the secondary level of design, I'm going to include just these keys as they are now, but maybe down at this lowest level here, I'm actually going to include all of my key members, and so all of my attributes, and including them all down here. So now having a very different look and feel depending on the objects, depending on what level of the design I'm at, a lot of flexibility in how I actually want to display this. So of course you can have behavior where perhaps all of your fact tables in a dimensional design have a particular fill color or something like that. You actually have the ability of doing that. You can even have that behavior just in one display of your whole entire model. So a very convenient way of getting that across to your end users at that design level. So some of at this point, we're kind of looking at how do I do just an initial reverse engineer. This is a model that came from a direct reverse engineer. There were just no design elements to this before we began the exercise today. And now we actually immediately are able to bring that in, start finding structure in there. What are the relationships between those objects, breaking them out into different circles of related objects, taking those subcircles, breaking them out even further to have this ability of kind of seeing, doing discovery within a design. This is a really, really powerful tool if you're inheriting a design from some tool that you, or design, I should say, maybe you're just reverse engineering a Teradata environment for the very first time, and you have no understanding of, this inherited, the structures within that environment. This is also very powerful when you use ERwin's new importing features. And this is just from the File Import menu. Anybody who's using one of the later versions of ERwin 7.3, I believe, was when this was introduced, or maybe one of the very late versions, 7.2. And of course, any of the versions of ERwin 8 actually allow you to import from external formats. And you actually have the ability here of importing many different kinds of source files. So whether it's an InfoSphere project or whether it's you're importing from your SQL Server tools, MicroStrategy, many common, you basically see here there's over 100 bridges. You have capability of importing from different modeling tools. If you've inherited a model from somebody else, you have the ability of importing many different BI tools, whether it's, market leaders like, the Cognos tools, Informatica's tools, the InfoSphere tools, Microsoft suite of products, just generic UML that you may even be working with some of your design teams with, XML, generic XML supported as well, OpenText eDoc, SAP's tools, SAP's MDM tool, if you're working with that, and many different tools that we see listed here. So you have the actual ability of kind of importing those designs, so potentially connecting, for example, one of the most robust bridges they have is to the MicroStrategy repository. So connecting to that repository, importing your project, and then actually being able to quickly break that out based on using like the circle tool and some of the other design tools to actually see some structure within there. So let me show you an example of this from a BW import that I have here that I'll show you quickly. Now this particular example, this was actually imported from an SAP BW design. And once again, we get this pretty ugly stack of tables in the middle of our table here, but we now have more tools here to kind of do some discovery. This was actually a 7.x model that I've just upgraded. That was what we basically just saw there, was the upgrade process to 8. And what I can do here is I'll show you yet another layout feature, which is the symmetric layout. Now, if you're doing dimensional designing, the symmetric layout is incredibly powerful. If I click on it and I zoom out, I'm going to see my nice snowflake, just as I was expecting to see. And smack dab in the middle is my fact. So you can imagine that you're inheriting a design such as this one, and being able to quickly identify those relationships. So we can actually have one diagram where we have this snowflake. I can create yet another diagram. And in this one, once again, I'm going to include all my objects again. And in this particular design, instead, I'm going to break out into these, I'm going to use these circular designs, or the circular design option, I should say. And then zoom out, and let's take a look at what circles we have broken out here. And let's take a look at this circle down here. I can actually highlight this one. I can select the hierarchical or the tree. Actually, I'm going to do a tree layout on that one. Reset my relationship paths, and I'm going to zoom in on that. And we'll see that this is all related to the organization table. So a very nice display of all the organization-related objects. I can copy them, create a new subject area. I'll call this organization. And I'm going to paste that there. And now we have a new subject area with these organization-related tables. So another very another usage of the tool, very powerful usage to be able to quickly, identify the subsets of your interest within your design. So if you're inheriting a design, how do I quickly discover this behavior and then build subject areas and such to make it easier for me to do my work, but also easier for me to, report that out to my end users. So let me go back to this AdventureWorks model that I was working on here and show you some other really nice features. All the editors now have a consistent look and feel. There's new features here. You can see like where used. So for example, if I go to my, every single object, by the way, has this where used property. So if I go to one of my domains, I can go to account number, for example, and I can see where is this used. So I can see the account number is being used in this vendor table on the column called account number, and then sales order header on account number. So are my domains properly assigned? Are they being used in the correct places? You can actually use this for a very quick way to validate that. If you have that report, you're actually doing some kind of validation, you can come here and validate that that is the case. And of course, this is available, whether I want to find out what tables are included in a particular subject area, what attributes are in a particular table, etc. That where used is a very powerful feature. But even more powerfully, within each one of these editors is the ability of, first of all, you'll see that there are fields up top that can be quickly, you can actually change properties up top if you wanted to change your schema owner, for example, from this pull-down menu. Rather than having to jump into many, many different editors, you can make the changes here. Without having to invoke multiple editors to achieve this. Once again, just saves you a lot of time to not have to keep going and building new editors to get to each one of these table properties. Granular undo within the editor, so I can actually step back and undo all those schema owner changes that I just made right now until it grays out. That means I'm back at the beginning. And then most powerfully for me, my favorite feature here within this editor is this filtering capability. So I actually have the ability here, for example, if I start typing in ship method, if I spelled that correctly, ship method, you see that I've quickly filtered down on just that object I'm looking for. So potentially you have hundreds and hundreds of tables. How do I quickly identify just the table I'm looking for? Or maybe I'm looking for objects related to a particular schema owner. So if I'm relating to purchasing, now I'm looking at all the objects related just to purchasing. So a very quick way of identifying that. And also maybe perhaps you've noticed that there's no SQL generated on a particular table. It might be because the table is designated as physical only or logical only in regards if you're on the logical side of the design, so it's not on the physical side of the model. You actually have the ability of seeing that here rather than having to go into a different editor to find that checkbox for every single one. A very simple way of doing that is to generate SQL checkbox turned on or off and being able to see that a little more quickly. But this filtering capability up top, incredibly powerful for me, being able to quickly find the object, the specific object I'm looking for, and start editing that particular within that particular context. Even more powerful, same functionality within the column editor. How do I quickly look for columns that are of type ID? So here's all these different ID columns. How about if I start typing in sales order number, salesperson. Or maybe I'm looking for, maybe I know the data type for a column, but I'm not sure what the column is. Maybe you're using a particular design, you've inherited a design, and you're using proprietary naming for some particular system. So you're not even sure exactly what the column name actually is in the table that you're looking for, but you do know that it has to be a tiny int, for example, based on what you're looking for. So now you can quickly just type in the data type name, and then you can identify, okay, well, these are the only two tiny ints, so it's probably one of these two. So a very fast way of doing a lot of the work you've been doing in the past. So this is really, really useful for being able to do this within the editor level itself, being able to say, okay, I'm looking for a particular object. I want to navigate to that object as quickly as possible. I want to get my work done as quickly as possible, and then being able to do it in a very simple way. There's a lot of other nice features here as far as being able, if you do use macros a lot and you want to start playing with some of this code, you can invoke your, jump right into the macro editor from here. And once you actually start making modifications to the code, maybe you want to check to see that it's expanding correctly or not. You can actually just click on this little toggle and you can see the expansion versus the unexpansion. So if something fails to expand, you would see it here before you actually deploy your SQL. It's a very useful tool if you are using the ERwin macros. The ability of linking columns, so you can link unrelated columns across your diagram. Maybe you have, for the context of master data, that certain attributes have particular properties across the entire diagram. You can link them to each other, make the change in one place, it propagates outwards. And you can also specify exactly what properties you want to maintain. Maybe it's just the column names. Maybe it's just the data types but not the column names. Maybe it's the data types and names but not validation rules and default values. You can actually be very granular on how you link those objects. That's something that's new. Probably not getting as much use as some of the other features, but I do want to mention it. Spell check. Anywhere you can enter free text, there is a spell check available. So a lot of really nice features. UDPs, this is something that's been around in ERwin for a very long time. If you're not using it, though, it's a very powerful tool. User-defined properties allows you to basically define metadata that you're not regularly capturing within your modeling. And oftentimes users now currently are using these UDPs to start using kind of some lightweight governance. Maybe you want to assign data stewards. You want to run reports on them later on to get out to those business users as well. You can actually do a lot of that here. So whether you want to capture your business rules, whether you want to do a little bit of light governance, a lot of functionality that can be included here. You want to embed links to external files, you can do that here as well. So if you're not using user-defined properties, a lot of the things that you're doing externally, maybe in an email, maybe on SharePoint somewhere, maybe in an external spreadsheet, you can probably be doing here. So definitely a best practice to start integrating that into your methods. And with that, the next topic I wanted to touch on was this idea of creating a central dashboard for your modeling. I've kind of begun to introduce the topic by showing you how each one of those editors has the ability of filtering and quickly identifying the particular object you're looking for. And you have the ability of doing this in the bulk editor even more powerfully. So what the bulk editor allows me to do is create a report. So for example, very commonly, of course. Now you'll notice, first of all, that this bulk editor has, basically all the metadata that's available within my diagram. But in this case, I can actually specify the column as my central focus of my report. What type of property types I'd like to include here? I might have my comment and object definition. I might want to include the physical name, of course, in case I want to do any renaming. The data type, null option. Null option, there it is. And different types of behavior like that. So a very useful way of being able to just basically specify any metadata that I'd like. Of course, I can save this. So if you've actually created this custom report, make sure to save it. You can either save it to the specific model, or you can save it to an XML location so you can actually share that with your team members or make it reusable for yourself in the future as well. For object instances, there are many different filters available, but in this case, I'm going to select all the columns in my model. There's some user settings here. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, but it has some more customization in how you display this. When I click Edit, I actually end up with a report of the actual model objects like I would expect to see. Now, I could sort on these columns like you would expect from a tabular report, but I can more powerfully than just reporting a static view of my metadata is that I can actually come here and make changes, whether it is changing my definitions. Maybe I want to paste them in here, paste some text in here from another location, and I want to have a spell check that's integrated. Spell check is available here, available for multiple languages, by the way, if you want to include those as well. Do you want to use macros within your definitions? You can include a macro unexpanded here, and it will expand appropriately depending on your context. If I copy and paste that into like all my columns at once or all my tables at once, it would upgrade to the appropriate expansion of the macro, so a very convenient way of deploying that. Do you want to change my data type? I can actually change it from a pull-down menu. Each one of these pull-down menus are active and can be modified. I see I have comments here as well. I can drag that over to be next to my definitions. Now, it's like I mentioned before, if I have any user-defined properties, by the way, I can include them here as well. So maybe I wanted to include my data steward here and then be able to run a report based on that as well. Now, the reason I call this kind of a dashboard is now I'm going to show, later on in just a few minutes, I'm going to show you how you can actually generate this out to your end users and the value of doing that, externalizing the file. But what you actually can do here is use the same functionality we saw in the other editors where I can filter. So now I've actually rather than having the context of one table like I showed you before, I can actually run this report across all my columns in my diagram all at once. And then once I'm here, I can actually start typing in filters, and those filters can be maybe I'm looking for something related to address type, whether it's a table address type up here, or maybe it's something within my definition or particular columns. If you're looking for ID columns across your entire diagram, you can actually find them by doing this. If you're looking for all columns that are, of a particular data type, like maybe just tiny ints, right? Here's all of my tiny ints in one location. Or maybe, once again, like I mentioned before, if I had created a data steward and assigned them, I can actually filter down just on those particular objects. Or maybe you're looking for something within a definition. So if I actually say, okay, first street address line. So if I'm looking for this definition specifically, even if you know what the object's definition is, you can actually identify that specific object simply based on its definition. So a very quick way of identifying this object. Now that I've actually identified this particular object, maybe I want to update a property that I didn't actually include as part of the report. So is there a convenient way for me to basically say, okay, well, I've located the object, but now what am I going to do? I'm going to go back into my model and just try to locate it somewhere in some table. Like, how do I conveniently get to that table from here? There's a very convenient way of doing it. Once you've selected the object, you actually jump into the Edit Selected Object. And now I've quickly jumped into that table in the correct context specifically to this table. I should say specifically in this table to this column. And then, of course, now I can come here and maybe change my validation rule, change a constraint property, any kind of properties I have here. So things that I may not have included as part of that central dashboard for reporting purposes, but now I can use that dashboard just with these core properties. Maybe I'm looking for tables related to a particular schema owner. Maybe I'm looking for tables that are of a particular type. Maybe I have some kind of notation where I can quickly identify whether a table is a fact or not based on its name. I can actually filter quickly there and then jump to the specific editor properties on that via this particular interface. So a very convenient way of getting from here to there and then back again. Another key feature of this bulk editor function, like beyond using this as a dashboard, I've actually removed the filter here on the particular objects. And this is one of the most powerful features of it, is that I can generate this as a report. I'm going to just call this test report. Only selected rows? No, I'm going to actually want to export everything. Let me go to my desktop and open that report up. And once we actually open this report up, we have the columns that we saw before. So a couple of key features here. You will see these ID values, I should say. ERwin uses these for something that's completely unique within the bulk editor, is to allow you to import this back into ERwin and accept those changes into the tool for modification. So you should not cut these out if you don't want to see them. Simply hide those properties, but don't delete them because we will need them in the future when we actually reintegrate our design. So once we've actually distributed this, maybe our users are going to make modifications to these definitions. And yes, not only can you export this, send it out to your end users, they can make modifications to the spreadsheet. They can rename the table names if they want to. They can change from, apply some kind of logic in Excel. You can create some kind of rule that says that, well, if this is the particular data steward, then change this property accordingly. You can actually do all of that in ERwin, and then take the text itself. You have to save it back as a CSV. So, of course, when you save it back to CSV, you lose all the macros and all these other behavior you might have attached to it. But the most important feature is once the CSV file is saved, you can then open it back up in ERwin, and everything gets integrated back into your design. So it just becomes a much more collaborative place to do this work. So once again, the bulk editor, very powerful as not only as a as a dashboard to do a lot of this modeling in one central location, but then a convenient way of exporting it out to your end users, importing it back in. So another one of my favorite things about the ERwin R8, very useful functionality there. So some other key features in R8, I've already introduced, the ability of importing and exporting to multiple different files, the ability of, using this bulk editor as a dashboard for your design work. There's new licensing. You can actually have concurrent licensing. So if you have ever wanted to use ERwin, but you wanted to have like shared licenses across multiple different users, you now have the ability of doing that. There is a a licensing methodology that allows you to have a shared license across multiple environments or multiple users. Maybe they're geographically diverse users. You have that functionality now. Another new functionality as well is another feature I wanted to point out is the ability of actually now publishing this out to a web portal. So let me show you some multiple different ways where you can actually publish this out. Crystal Reports comes bundled in with ERwin now, much more tightly bundled than it has been in the past, where it was kind of just as a separate add-on tool. Now it's actually bundled into the software. You can execute your reports right from inside ERwin. You can modify those reports and execute them the next time you come back. So for example, you may want to, I've taken, ERwin comes with a data dictionary. I've actually updated it, made a modification to it. And we're going to see here when I generate this report, my data dictionary, which I'm going to be able to publish to as a PDF or publish in many different formats. So I'll show you the methodology for doing that. Crystal Reports does take about a minute to run, to launch, I should say, the first time I run it. Not sure why it takes longer that first time versus the subsequent times, but it does take about a minute to get this thing going the first time. So this is actually what's opening now. This is the Crystal Reports viewer. You see that I have multiple diagram levels. I have multiple subject areas. I can actually specify which ones I want to publish. I can specify what order I want the data dictionary to be in, whether it's going to be logical, physical, the column order, or the alphabetical order. I'm going to do alphabetical just because it's something that's unique within the editor here. And when I click OK, Crystal Reports will deliver the documentation. With Crystal Reports Viewer, which is a free product, by the way, your users can navigate within here. They can search. They can click from one subject area to another, to a particular table within that subject area, look for the definitions, different properties. You can add additional properties here. If it does take a little understanding of Crystal Reports, but pretty straightforward. I actually have a webinar that goes into detail doing just Crystal Reporting, but adding an additional property is pretty straightforward. You can go to Edit Design and basically just drag and drop additional metadata into this tabular report. But we have this report here. Step one, I simply execute it right from inside of my pinned reports. Step two, once it's actually in this Crystal Reports viewer, I can either publish it this way. You can web publish. Like I mentioned before, Crystal Reports viewer is actually a free tool to anybody who wants it. But you can also just export it as a PDF file, for example, or as a Word document, or as an Excel spreadsheet, which is formatted. You can have Excel spreadsheet with all the formatting, like all the icons and your headers and everything else. Or you can also just export just the tabular report, so data only. So lots of different options for how you actually want to export this report to your end users. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple way of doing that. You also have the ability, of course, of generating a graphical report. Once again, from pinned reports, I can do a diagram picture report. And we see how much faster it is after that initial pass. And I can specify that I want these two diagrams, and let's see, I want this one and this one. So these are the diagrams within the subject areas. These are the ones that actually, let me go back because I didn't format that one. Let me get this employee-related one. So just a couple of them. I don't have to publish all of them. They get cluttered in the generated report here. And now I see the graphical report of this view. Once again, I may want to publish this out to, how do I get this to my end users? Once again, this is one methodology. I can embed it in this Crystal Reports viewer, a free tool, or I can do an export to a PDF, just like I showed you before. Or you can actually even go into, if I click on Edit Design from here, and this will open the full version of Crystal Reports. And from here, you can actually do a file export. And there are many other options here. There's HTML, of course, HTML 3.2 and 4.0. There's all the Excel. You can create another ODBC layer to it if you want to subquery it. Lots of different options here. You can just export it. If it's just textual, you can export it to different texting formats as XML as well, although formatting the XML is not always the easiest thing to do. But, so a lot of different options here. So if you wanted to do an HTML publication from this as well. So all of this is supported right out of the box. You don't have to purchase the Crystal Reports, by the way. It is, once again, just free with ERwin, and it's available here for deployment. And my favorite tool for deploying diagram reports, by the way, for web publication as well, is to actually do this tools diagram picture. And I have the ability of either generating the current diagram, which is just what I'm viewing in the background, or I can select to generate diagram pictures. And what I like about this is, let me browse and go to my desktop. And I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm just going to call it test. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to select a few of the diagrams as well, the employee-related one, this other one I put in the product category here, and let's take the original one as well. And I'm going to do a save. Now let me go into that folder and show you what we end up with. We end up with these EMF files. Now, EMF files are just metadata files for Windows. And what's nice about this is that, first of all, the naming is a standard. Whenever you generate these, it'll have the ERwin model name. So make sure to use better names than I've used. I just use model_2, which is obviously not a very descriptive name. So make sure to give your models useful names. But you'll have the model name, subject area name, and then diagram name. So this is a standard. And the reason this is useful is every time I publish, let's say I just publish on a regular basis, I will override the existing ones with the latest version of the diagram. So it kind of removes a lot of process. And then I can actually have a URL that links directly to these files. And each one, every time anyone clicks on that link, they're looking at the most recently published version of that model. And what I like about these EMF files is that if I open this up, your users can zoom in to any level, and you can see that they can see a great amount of detail, unlike those like PDFs and things like that, where a lot of times, depending on the level of their zoom, or depending on when you generated the diagram, the text cannot even be read. But by using this EMF file, you can have they can zoom in as far as they want, see the text at that level of display. It's the actual metadata of the view itself, and then they can actually web publish them. I mean, they can actually publish themselves. So if they want to do a print to PDF, they can print here. If they want to print to a plotter, they can print here as well. So a really nice, convenient way of doing that. And like I mentioned before, you can simply embed those links. If you want to say, well, I want to embed a link, but I don't know what the name is going to appear when I generate those files, it will always have the same naming standard. It's model name _ subject area name _ diagram name. So if you publish once, create the URL to this report, it'll be active forever, because as long as you don't change your diagram names, it will, those links will be valid. So that's actually my favorite way of getting these out to end users, and it kind of bypasses a lot of these issues. You can see the level of magnification here compared to what potentially might be what would be available within like a Word document or a PDF, which oftentimes will truncate the image at the edge of the page, and then of course cut off exactly what the end user was hoping to find within the diagram. So that is an overview of some of my favorite features in ERwin. I look forward to, I don't know if many of you may have gotten the announcement via my LinkedIn group. If you want to continue the conversation there and see what, features do you like about ERwin, what features don't you like about ERwin. I know reporting has been an issue for users, but hopefully some of the things I showed you here actually shows how you can be, productive using some of the new features. And I look forward to, taking your questions. So if anybody has any questions now, please feel free to provide them to me, and I'll answer them now in the last few minutes we have of the presentation. We're going to put the phone on hold for just a minute, and feel free to ask any questions you may have, and then we'll take them in just a moment. Okay, we do have, I think we just have one question. Hopefully, if you would like to add, hopefully this will open the floodgates to additional questions, but if not, don't feel bad about it. I know a lot of this functionality is new to many of you, and some of you are not even using ERwin R8, but hopefully it'll motivate you to. I do want to just show you one more functionality here based on the question we just received. If you're not seeing the bulk editor tab down below, the way to turn that on is you go to your View, Windows, Bulk Editor pane, and this is where you invoke your bulk editor from. So once you turn that on, once again, it's View, Windows, Bulk Editor pane, or just the Control and the letter B, like boy, or a browser, and that would actually open the bulk editor pane as well. So that's the way to invoke that. So if anybody who was not seeing that previously, that's how you activate it. And I'm just going to have a couple more slides I'm going to cover here, and I don't think we're going to get any additional questions, so I just want to touch on a couple more. Oh, there's one more question, actually. I think, I believe you mentioned the data dictionary. Yes, that is different. Yeah, the data dictionary I was basically describing as far as generating that report is something that was just at the model level. There is reporting, by the way, there is reporting, and this hasn't really fundamentally changed. That's why I didn't really touch it as a topic. Hasn't really fundamentally changed from the earlier versions, but you can also within the model manager, if you are using the model manager for collaborative modeling, you can run these reports across, within the model manager across multiple diagrams. So what I provided there as far as generating that data dictionary report was within the context of one model, but that similar functionality is available in the context of multiple diagrams within the model manager repository. So the last couple of points I wanted to touch upon, and by the way, I hope I did answer your question, Mick. If that wasn't exactly what you were asking, feel free to contact us afterwards, and I'll go into more detail. I can answer you specifically. So like the last couple of points I want to touch on, I know we're a little over time. ERwin.com, great resource if you haven't been there recently. Expert bloggers, great community, over 1,000 members actively using the user community. There is an entire dedicated area just for reporting questions. So if you're like, boy, I really wish I can't figure out quite how to generate this report and crystal reports that would have embedded URLs to my diagrams or something like that. If you wanted to be able to do functionality like that, people out there are already doing this. It's kind of pain points they're having as well. They're creating those reports. They're publishing them out on the community, and then anybody can go there and just kind of download them, put them on your local environment, and now you can execute those reports as well. So great resource for reporting, great resource in general just for, new topics in data management, strategies around big data. They have monthly webinars on the ERwin site themselves, aside from our own webinars here, of course. So a great resource in general. So in conclusion, some of these new ERwin R8 features allow you to quickly discover the logic within inherited designs, building your subject areas faster and more easily than ever before, customize the view of those within these diagrams in a completely unique way to an extent that you haven't been able to see before. Something I didn't even touch upon, you can even filter out objects. So maybe you want to show your identifying relationships but not non-identifying relationships, you can actually do that. Building a modeling dashboard with the bulk editor allows you to quickly locate and update those model objects. You can export those reports for collaboration with other business users. And the bundled reporting tools actually allow quick deployment of those reports like we saw today, quickly generating graphical reports, textual reports, formatted reports that are useful to those end users for their own use. So next action is try it out. When you exit out of this, you'll actually get a link that you can actually download the eval software. If you're using an ERwin 8, or I should say if you're using ERwin 7 or ERwin 4.1.4 and have not tried out ERwin 8, you can install it without it stepping on the toes of your existing installations. It runs as a separate application, so feel free to download it and give it a try. And contact me if you'd like via LinkedIn, Maximum Data Modeling. You can just Google search for Maximum Data Modeling. You'll find all of these links there. And reach out to me at any one of those social media channels, and I'll reach out to you as well. And we'll keep you informed of any upcoming events on our side. So I guess we've taken our questions for now. And thank you for attending. And we'll see you next month.
Great, thanks, Victor. If anybody does have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at ca.erwin@techextend.com. You can also contact us at info@techextend.com as well. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.